last thing I wanted to touch on is I think Star Wars, are we gonna do it? I think the performance of the last video says yes, and people were excited to see more of it. So I'm down to do more Star Wars. Question was, what are we gonna cover? So I had talked to Sophia last week. Let's come up with a quick brainstorming list of all the possibilities that we can do.
We have the Benethors, right?
Yeah.
Or just, does that count as a unit?
Yeah. Yeah, so we have script rev 1.
Some are.
Yeah, some are.
Then we can do Benethor.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we have that right here. So the goal would be before we do any one of these in particular, I'd like for us to do a brainstorming cover and then run a Patreon poll or a community poll to be like, you know, which one of these would you like us to do? So just that way we
Speaking of that, this is definitely me, stepping on Christina's toes. Did run a Patreon poll on the Matrix
Fremen, whatever warriors. Gondor, yeah, it is definitely taking the lead on the poll.
Okay. Yeah, that was.
Okay, I'm just gonna. If you want to see the stream, go ahead. There's a call happening. Well, I guess it's time to break. I'm gonna hop off and do stream stuff. So you might also tones. I'll link them to you. Okay, it should no longer be picking up audio, and then if we switch to the main screen, which should do this, and then we mute that. Okay, so what does it sound like? Okay. Okay, so now that we've switched over, I'm gonna do a quick test of like audio sounds. So I'm just gonna like hit my keyboard a bunch. We're gonna see if that does anything. Alright, who disliked the video? I see you. I can see you. I know you did it. Which one of you jokers? So did it do the audio sounds? Did it pick it up? Okay, so now that we've switched over, I'm gonna do a quick test of like audio sounds. So I'm just gonna like hit my keyboard a bunch. We're gonna see if that does anything. Awesome. Audio is suppressed, which was like that was the big one. I think that. Okay, okay. I'm muting my own stream now. But we've got this nice outline. We've got these nice we've got these little assets. We've got the slideshow. And I know that this isn't the outline that we're ultimately going to be using, but it's the one that I've got at the moment. And I also really like it. And Alex, if you're watching, I really like it. I love what you've done here. We will, let's see. I wonder. So one of the things that I will need, if we're going to be using this layout or a layout similar to it, is like several title cards. So actually, while I'm thinking about it, let me just title cards. Simple layout, one layout, one. So we need, yeah, and I did make a title card list. We need those. Those are absolutely needed. So the title card list has been moved up in the asset request file from like scraps to like we need those. Because even if we are using the new section layouts that Julian has designed and that you've put together, Alex, it's circled. We need, and the title cards can just be individual like little pieces, little files. They don't have to be anything special. So you need individual title cards. We will need those. So I'm just going to mark that in blue on the thing. And yeah, they don't have to be anything fancy, literally just a brown square that is the same color as this brown here at the top where it says Patreon Q&A. I just need something in that font in those squares that I can just overlay, and I can switch from scene to scene to scene. And that should do just fine. Also, whoever did the art assets, the like base art assets, like the like little fox that we have as Christina's placeholder, I love that art style. I love that art style so much. That's really good. It's very enjoyable. Anyway, I guess, I should, since I've just got this on, so introduce topic and speakers. So I would introduce myself. Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm one of the primary researchers at Invicta. I cover Byzantine history, some late Roman history, Carolingian history. I study the Ottonians. I study the medieval West in like what we would call the Dark Ages period. I specialize in like politics and theology and like a little bit of military history. We have Chris, who is a classicist who specializes in whatever it is that he specializes in. And then we have Christina, who is a PhD in Roman material history, specifically studying the Severan dynasty. She's incredibly impressive and is our main speaker today. Let's turn it over to Christina. She's not feeling very talkative. So instead of that, let's plug the Patreon and social media. So, you know, if you're watching this stream, you should definitely go and follow us at Invicta History. How do I want to do this? You should follow us on Invicta History, and you should absolutely, like, talk, like, a lot. We want to hear your opinions. We want to hear all of your, like, inane thoughts. Like, anything that you think, wow, that's too stupid to share with another person. No, it's not. Share it with us. Let us see. Let us talk. If you want to say, like, wow, you know, Hannibal did nothing wrong. Which is... Come on, let me think of a better one than... here we go. Socrates did nothing wrong. Socrates was a traitor to the state, and Plato's apology was false, and he was killed justly, which is wrong. That's not true, probably. If you want to say stuff like that, we will absolutely engage with you and talk to you about it, like directly on social media. I'm signing Christina up for this task as we speak. I'm doing it. We're doing it. That's what we're doing. So you should go follow us on Invicta History, and if you have the spare money, we would always appreciate it to keep the channel running. We've got a lot of staff. We've got a lot of people. We've got an amazing art team, Penta Create. They are what you're seeing on screen right now, actually. They did this wonderful scene of like a Jedi being talking to a crime lord, which is actually based off of the classic movie Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. So just so that you know, we've got taste, we've got culture. You should give us your money. So I really hope that this is the tone that Julian wants, because this is the tone that he's going to get. We can discuss sources now, and we can discuss cut content. So there's so much that gets left on the cutting room floor that you guys don't even see. Like, for example, the Harold Hadreda series was originally going to be a more, wasn't going to focus on the legend so much as the history. And we, hold on. Since I've got this little soapbox that I can stand on, I can show off some of my writing. So let me just get a little bit of a teaser for you that you're not going to get anywhere else. Because the author is going to read it to you. And by author, I mean authoress, because I'm a girl, despite my voice. I should just, note that. She, her, and so on. So let me just open that up, and I will read a little piece to you. If it will. Just a moment. But while we're talking about Harold Hadreda, or Hadrada, or Hardrada, however you pronounce it, which honestly, I guess I should know, since I'm the one who, wrote the script on it. I really should know how his last name is pronounced. But it's not even a last name. It's an epithet, isn't it? It just means harsh ruler, or asshole. Okay, I definitely can't say that on the big stream. No cursing allowed, for sure. Let's see. When a comet struck Rise of Byzantium. Ooh, teaser for the Rise of Byzantium series. Big secret. We've got 5 episodes written. You should come watch them. Harold Hadreda, or Hadrada. So if we go to Harold Hadrada 1, we can go to Harold Hadrada Part 1, Rev 4? Rev 4. No, not Rev 4. Rev 4 is the final version. That's what, we want to talk about what's on the cutting room floor, so we should probably go to Rev 2, which is after my dear, wonderful Christopher, fixed stuff. So let's see. I don't like that either. We're gonna go back all the way to my writing. So beneath a shadowed sun a great king dies, and above a corpse field the blackbirds wing, and through the deep forest a boy of 15 stumbles and bleeds. So ends the Battle of Stiklestad, and thus a saga is born. Today we're going to paint a portrait of the past and talk about the Varangian king of Norway, Harald Sigurdsson. So already, completely different. I had kind of pitched this idea of portraits of the past, which was going to be a very lifelike, a very, very historical look into some figures where we only pull direct evidence from, I say trusted sources. A lot of the sources were Byzantine sources and chronicles of lives and, mentions of where, Harold was and what he was doing and what we can extract from that. And so the idea was very much a, cut and dried, true account of what we know about this man's life. This didn't make it to the final version. Instead, we went with a legendary account of Harold Hadreda, which, I will admit, did much better on the numbers. But let's scroll down, see? And here is a verse that was very, very, very dubiously attributed to Harold Hadreda about his escape from the Battle of Stiklestad. And he said, and I quote, "Through endless woods I crawl, on my way now with little honor. Who knows but that my name may yet be far and wide renowned." Oof, I need to get better at my verse recitation. So after Stiklestad, Harold spent about a month recovering from his wounds, and the following spring he made his way east to Sweden, where he joined up with the defeated army of Count Olaf. So Olaf, well, not Count Olaf, Jarl Olaf. Olaf was Harold's older brother who tried to take over Sweden but failed, and is a saint now, I believe. Not Sweden, Norway. He tried to take over Norway. And then, from there, he went south to the lands of the Rus under Grand Prince Yaroslav the Wise, that's probably a name you've heard if you've watched our channel at all. We've talked about Yaroslav. I believe he comes up in our Druzina episode. I wanted to do a portrait of the past on Yaroslav the Wise, actually. I think he'd be a very interesting character to study, and by character, I mean human being. At Novgorod, he and his ragged company were hired on as Varangian mercenaries by the Grand Prince, and likely fought on his behalf for about 3 years, from 1031 to 1034. Such mercenary contracts were probably on 12-month rotations, so for the period of a year, the prince would feed and maintain his mercenaries. So, like, they got room and board, but they weren't getting paid, right? And then at the end of the year, they would get one bulk payment, which was probably in, like, furs, or spices, or amber, or honey, or any, like, good that can be traded, like, at a high value, because coinage, especially in this medieval period and in the, like, Kiev and Rus Ukraine area, was very, very uncommon. Like, coins weren't used. There wasn't really a coin economy, per se. But when Harold was serving as a Varangian under Yaroslav, he was, like, 16. So he probably wasn't a captain, even though he was a prince. The person who was doing all of the actual shot calling was likely a guy named Rudolph or Ralof, something like that, who was the man who, like, got him out of Stiklestad. I'm just talking to fill time. His ability in combat, complemented by his noble lineage, earned him the respect of Yaroslav. And one of the things that Harold really did rely on, like, throughout his entire career, was the patronage of powerful men. Like, he needed Yaroslav's respect and patronage. He needed the patronage of the Byzantine emperors. He needed the patronage of all of these powerful men, because he was essentially just a wanderer. He didn't have a home. He didn't have, like, his own place to be. He just had connections, which is why his future wife, Elizaveta, is very, very important. Because that Elizaveta was the daughter of Yaroslav, and they would form a marriage alliance, which would get Harold a lot of the, like, legitimacy and connections and trade rights and stuff that he would need to, like, ease his kingship of Norway later on in his life. But likely when he was a mercenary, he probably served as a taxman. People didn't like paying taxes. People still don't like paying taxes. Taxation is theft. But especially when a guy in armor with an axe rocks up to your homestead and says, "Give us your goats," which is what he did. Some intimidation was usually needed, and just as likely, a caravan of grain, animals, and coin was a juicy target for any band of steppe raiders. Harold also very likely served in the Grand Prince's bloody campaign against Poland when Yaroslav attempted to take several Polish border towns. I'm not an expert on it, and unfortunately we don't have a map at the moment. Harold and his company of veteran Varangians was then set free, right? They were relieved of their contracts, but at this point Harold is like 18 or 19, and he's definitely taken command of the company, like, now that he's, like, come into his own and proved his veterancy and, like, fought and been in these campaigns. And from there, he left his position with the Rus, not out of greed or wanderlust, but out of love. At least, that's what according to the sagas. I personally think Harold was incredibly greedy, and he looked south and saw the grand city of Miklagard, which we know is Constantinople, and thought, oh, there's big money there. So, in the sagas, he requested Elizaveta's hand in marriage, and Yaroslav says, no, you are a mercenary, you are a Varangian, you are some wandering guy with no home, and my daughter is the daughter of the Grand Duke of the Kiev and Rus. Like, I'm an incredibly powerful man, I have an incredibly powerful daughter. No way, kid, get out. And so Harold goes to prove his name and earn his worth and come back and earn his bride. Probably not. Harold was 18, Elizaveta was like 13 or 10, something like that. Very, very young. I doubt he had any interest in her. And if he did, we should shame him for it. But regardless of what happened, he headed south. He headed south to Greekaland to make a lot of money. He sailed south, probably with the same mercenary band whose had survived Stiklestad, and these men had kind of a blood oath to Harold's family. They were his brother's housecarls, and now they were Harold's Varangians. And so he came to the high-walled city of Constantinople, clad in traditional armor of chain augmented already by Byzantine-inspired lamellar adopted from the Rus with Nordic longswords on their hips and great axes in their hands. This band of veterans probably looked every bit like the Varangian warriors who were already feared and respected throughout the Levant. And we have another excerpt of Harold's poetry. Bleak gales lashed prows hard along the shoreline. Iron-shielded, our ships rode proud to harbor. Of Miklagard, our famous prince first saw the golden gables. Many a sea ship, fine arrayed, swept towards the high-walled city. So, high-walled is kind of a big deal because most places don't have walls, and also the Theodosian walls are very, very impressive. They are so big. And it is likely that Harold had never seen a population center of this size. When Constantinople was probably the largest city in Europe at this point in time. I'm not 100% on that, don't quote me. So when Harold arrived in Constantinople in the early summer, the city was under the rule of the freshly remarried Empress Zoe, who we're definitely going to talk about in the future. We should absolutely do an episode on Empress Zoe and her husband Michael IV, who was low-born. Michael IV, I believe, was a caulker. He was not of royal blood. He was not of any kind of nobility, and he was not liked. But here the stories diverge back to Harold's story. In the first, Harold presents himself to the Empress and Emperor as royalty and gains their formal recognition, as well as Zoe's barely concealed lust. So you can imagine it, right? You know, this big strapping warrior, 19 years old, walks into, the great throne room of the Caesars, and, the Empress just can't contain herself. This was a barroom story. For sure, this did not happen, right? This is something you tell to your friends. She was this big, and so on. You get the idea. Other sources suggest that Harold attempted to keep his identity hidden, because the Byzantines didn't like foreign princes as their mercenaries, because a foreign prince in a mercenary band is nothing but trouble, because a foreign prince is going to, try to take over, or take the mercenary band with him, or declare himself Emperor of the Romans. See Robert Guiscard, which is happening probably around this time. I think Robert and Harold might have fought. It's very likely. Anyway, Harold's identity was sniffed out. They figured out who he was really fast, probably because he couldn't shut up about it, and also he had a band of 500 men who all knew who he was, and probably couldn't shut up about it. And within a month, he and his men in 4 light ships were out chasing sleek Arabic pirate vessels in the Aegean. This is what most of the Varangians were doing, because the Byzantines, while they did have a dedicated navy, getting Vikings to do it for you was better. Just hiring raiders to go raid? Perfect. Economically beautiful. You don't even have to pay them. They can just take whatever they get. So really, they were just pirates. Privateers, more specifically. And the sagas say he was probably under the command of a guy named Girgir, which is probably the Norse name for the Byzantine strategos George Maniakes. George Maniakes, or Georgios Maniakes, right, was a cool guy. He was supposed to be 7 foot tall, voice like a thundering mountain, every bit Harold's legendary equal, and one of the great generals of his age. In legend, this Greek commander, is just the opposite Harold. He's Harold's, Greek opposite. He's his foil. He's described by more realistic sources as a man... more realistic, I say. As a man standing nearly 10 feet tall with a voice that dominated both the court and the battlefield. But when his contract ran up as a sailing Varangian, Harold was brought along with the imperial army as it mounted a counteroffensive into northern Mesopotamia in 1035. Where he's reputed to have sacked and razed, quote, twice 40 fortresses, or 80. 80 is kind of the Greek saga term for a lot, a lot. In the same way we would be like, oh, he sacked 1,000,000,000 fortresses, right? They would say 80. Same deal. He probably didn't sack 80 fortresses, but he did sack a lot of fortresses. The following verse was likely written by Harold himself after he had returned to Norway as a sort of memoir of this campaign, so this is kind of a first-hand account of this campaign from, like, a known narcissist, so take it with a grain of salt. One other time there was when I reddened blades from my homeland, the swords singing in the Arab town, and yet that was long ago. So that's just, he was on that campaign. We know that he was on that campaign. His own poetry says that he was on that campaign. We'll take him at his word on that. And he was on pretty much every campaign. Harold was there when they sent a massive war fleet to recover Sicily and southern Italy. He was there at the wars with the Bulgarians when Basil II, earned his epithet the Bulgar Slayer. Harold was there for that. Harold was probably also went to Jerusalem as a bodyguard to a group of... Because the Caliphate and the Byzantine Empire didn't hate each other. I mean, they were states that lived next to each other. They traded regularly. And while they were constantly raiding back and forth, there was some level of diplomacy. And one of those levels of diplomacy was periodically Christian missions were allowed to go to Jerusalem to, like, rebuild the Dome of the Rock or restore Christian holy sites. And Harold was probably a bodyguard for one of those missions. He didn't go there, like, for war. He went there to protect a bunch of architects and, like, scribes and workmen who were sent to, like, restore Christian monuments in Jerusalem, which was common enough. This happens, like, once an emperor or so. However, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's what he was going to restore. By 1042, Harold's fortunes had changed. Michael IV was dead, and his successor, Michael V, hated Harold. And that was probably Harold's fault, because Harold was a jerk. There's a very good chance that Harold was using his newfound position in the Varangians of the city, which is like the elite of the elite, to extort people. He would, go around and just demand, quote, taxes, close quote, and then just keep them. And he was charged with extortion and put in jail. And I personally believe that Harold was absolutely extorting people. If we know anything about his later life, where he's just like a backstabbing, no good, money-stealing jerk, tyrant king, right? I absolutely believe that he was just extorting people with his power. So he was imprisoned, along with two of his prominent lieutenants who were probably aiding him in his extortion scheme. But at the same time that Michael arrested Harold, he deposed Empress Zoe. And Empress Zoe was beloved. She had been around for 50 years. She was the backbone upon which Michael's reign was built, because she was the only one with a shred of legitimacy and a connection to the Macedonian dynasty. So these two actions done so closely together incited riots and revolt. And of course, the city of Constantinople is known for revolting, at the drop of a hat. I don't know if you heard me snap my fingers, but I snapped my fingers. So in the streets, the people were howling for blood, screaming for the return of their empress. And Harold could probably hear that. He was in the Numa, which was in the walls, guarded by, wall guards and stuff. He could definitely hear the riots. And then the Patriarch of Constantinople legitimized the riots and said, you know what? Yeah, we should overthrow Michael V. And I think that's all the time I've got for. But this is just kind of me talking. If you're still listening, I'm so glad you're here. I love you. But that was our test, and I think our test is good. So I will see you next time, gang.